Okay, does it say recording on everybody's side?
It says recording.
Okay, perfect.
All right, we're recording. Yay, here's our Team 2 first discussion. How exciting. We're going to discuss a few topics today. I was going to start with talking about some critical team design processes, such as the development of a team charter. One of the things that they set out goals is the goal clearly defined, that goals should be clear and simple, and then specify an end, but not means on how to get there. Did I cut out?
A little bit.
Yeah, I felt it. It seems like we've all had experience in teams. Can anybody talk about any type of team processes they've had in creating a goal or creating a team? I mean, just like we created our team here, it took a lot of work for us to all get here today.
Yes, absolutely. One thing that I found interesting, or something that I really thought about when I was reading about team charters, is the type of team. Because last year I joined a virtual team, so they closed our regional office, so we became all of a sudden a virtual team. Like, we never saw it, we were just never going to see each other. Our meetings were all going to be online. So even though we were already a team before that, the need to create a new team charter and how we communicated and how we interacted with each other and the cadence around that was even more important, because it was a new type of team, and how we were just going to leverage Zoom and Skype and just virtual tools. So that's something that I thought about when reading through that, and thought that would have been nice, like, last year, if I understood the need for that. It was kind of like a trial and error for me, and just stumbling through it, because it was like 1 month they told us we're closing the office and we became a virtual team. So it was just kind of like a whirlwind, but being able to identify that need early on would have been very beneficial for our team, I think.
Yeah, I just don't know that I've ever been in that many situations where you get to sit down and just thoughtfully design the team, right? I always just end up in situations like that where suddenly you're just thrown into something.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you don't get to select members, you're not sitting there designing your communication style or anything else. It's just everything just kind of happens to you, kind of suddenly, So to me, the whole idea of just thoughtfully sitting down and planning it out and laying out what you'd like to do in the team and all those kind of things, that to me is just a foreign concept, right?
Well, for me, since I'm actually like the market coordinator, that's like kind of what I take responsibility for, just because I support like all of California and Arizona, and to bring all those people together takes that, I guess, charter, that communication, to actually make it happen. So bringing people together is what I do best.
Well, that's good. And you have a lot of online tools, a lot of virtual tools,
Mm-hmm.
do that, right? As opposed to maybe 10 years ago would be much
exactly.
Harder, right?
And I actually worked on a virtual team years ago, probably like 8-10 years ago, and it was definitely hard. I mean, video conferencing meant a $10,000 TV on your wall with some audio equipment that 10 VPs had to approve, because you wanted to work in California instead of Minnesota. So a lot easier now.
Yeah, I have to say this is my first virtual team where we see each other face to face. Whereas most teams I've ever been on are designed for me. This book kind of discusses team members having a say in some sort on the quality and personnel of each team. I've never really, in my experience, we've worked with an offsite facility in Austin, and we've only had just like teleconferencing, so this whole video and being able to see the other people on my team is fairly new. It kind of makes me nervous. I don't know why, but
you definitely get used to it, and you find the different etiquettes behind it. And for me, it was like, learning, like talking to my team about not eating and chewing on the calls when we're recording,
I would think that
like
would
things
be
like that, and getting your dog out of the way so they're not barking. So those were like a lot of things we just had to say. Like, some people would think it's common sense, but I literally had to send communication out, like, okay, these are the do's and the don'ts of our virtual meetings. And it helped a lot, because it was just, when somebody's giving up their time, and whether it be 1 hour or 8 hours, I think it's important to have some ground rules, because everybody's busy.
Yeah.
I think this class helps too, because it's one of my first times really using virtual connecting, and it's kind of the way the world is going now. And so a lot of us who have been just sort of like in a store in one place, it's kind of more global. So, I mean, even being ASU online and going to school in Arizona, and it's, I think, 5 o'clock on the West Coast, but it's almost bedtime for me over here. And just learning to sort of collaborate with each other to get used to these new technologies. I'm speaking as if I'm super ancient, I'm not trying to, but it's definitely helped sort of like get into the full swing of the 21st century, I guess.
Cool. Something else that I thought was interesting from the material this week was the design of team. In that video from Boeing, it talked about how they created the team mainly based on, I'm sorry, not Boeing, the Manhattan Project one, the video clip 2, how they brought people together towards a common goal, rather than, they were all very young, inexperienced, so they didn't know what wasn't possible, so they didn't have that like mind frame of we can't do that. They just thought everything was possible. And I feel like that's kind of like how startups are successful, is because they're predominantly the younger generation, or people straight out of college, and they have no idea what they can't do or not allowed to do, or any hurdles that other people before them have faced. So I think that's something that I thought about when I was watching that video.
Yeah, it reminds me of a story when I was first starting out. I worked for the state police here in Arizona, the Department of Public Safety, but I was a computer programmer. I didn't have a gun or anything. And me and my buddy were kind of like programming together, having a good time, but we were both like in our early 20s, so we really didn't know anything about anything. We were just dumb as a box of rocks. But we had to go to a meeting one time, and police were telling us they needed a system built, they needed, something done. And our boss's boss like stood up in the meeting and said, wait, what you're asking for is really big. It's going to take 9 months. It's going to take a year to build, or something like that. And my buddy raised his hands and he goes, it'll take us 3 days. We can have this done in 3 days. And they're like, really? And, it was like, everybody was like, really? And I was like surprised he would like try to show up to boss's boss in the meeting. And they're like, okay, well, go put the design together and tell us how you're going to get it done. So I just remember walking back to our office, and I was just so mad at him. I'm like, now we have to work through lunch, you idiot. Like before, we were just away, but now it's like, now we have something we have to sit down and do. So it actually took us about 10 days to build. So he was a little bit optimistic, but still, it was definitely faster than 9 months.
Absolutely. And I think that's where, I worked for Target as HR for 10 years, and we did a lot of talent planning, succession planning, and that's definitely something that I remember thinking about, like mixing the tenured with the new enroll team members, and making sure there was like a good mix because of that thought process. Exactly. Bringing ideas and not being afraid because they have no idea. Yeah. But also bringing the experience of the tenured team members to the table, and finding that balance is really just hard. Yeah. And it takes a lot of time. But I appreciated the whole the reading and the readings and the videos around team design.
Yeah, I thought the Boeing videos were really good. Interesting just to see how interdisciplinary they were.
Did anybody else have any topics from this week's readings or videos that stood out to them?
One thing that stood out for me was when it talked about a bias towards outside information. In my work, I work in a very small team. We used to be a team of about 8, but due to setbacks in the amount of business, we've been cut down to 4. So we have the same amount of work, only 4 people. And I don't see that bias towards outside information, at least particularly in my situation. We are very close and we're interconnected, and we rely heavily on one another and the people around us. We'll gladly take information from the outside, but we don't put any higher value in outside information. I would say we put more value towards our team and each other.
Do you feel that having a smaller team makes it easier to communicate and get things done, even though there's a lot more things to do? But do you feel there's like less red tape or less like back and forth?
Not really, since we've kind of, like I said, we took the same amount of work and crammed it into 4 people's agendas, and I think it actually hinders our cohesiveness and our ability to communicate a little bit because we're always so busy. It's hard. We have like a once a week status meeting, and it's kind of really hard to find the time to communicate everything so that everybody's aware of what everybody else is doing. Yeah, I think small teams are good, like it says. I agree, but there's a point where it's too small.
Yeah. No, and that's kind of where I'm at, because there's only 2 of us, and we cover like 4 states, and right now we're actually trying to find different ways to kind of track each other's work, not on a level, but just because we're on different time zones, and just to see where we're at on certain projects. So we're looking at project apps and just like Trello and different apps that we can use from Microsoft Suites, or just any apps that can help us project manage.
One of the other topics that they were that they had on the, or Dr. Chinley had on the list, was to connect key concepts associated with team design, identity, and development with our own experiences. And Jess, you said you're a store manager with Starbucks. I know that when I first started working with Starbucks, I thought it was really interesting how they had shift supervisors who were sort of like the clay crawler, and they lead the floor. So you have your store manager, but then you're not necessarily the person in charge. And so that was a really interesting concept for me to grasp when I started working for Starbucks at first, because I had come from being the GM of a restaurant, and you're like, you make all the calls in a restaurant, and to step back and let your shift supervisor sort of take the lead on what was going on was just a huge transition. Did you have that experience, Jess, when you started working at Starbucks, or was it just me?
I'm pretty new to Starbucks as well. I've only been there a little bit less than a year. I came from big box retail, so very different in the sense of like teams. So like to touch upon what you guys were talking about earlier with the smaller teams, is I totally agree. It's way easier to communicate with a smaller team, because I was coming from, having like 50 employees. Like, how am I going to be able to talk to all of them? So now having like 15, it's way easier. But yeah, with that as well. And in Massachusetts, we have shift managers. So they even have more responsibility than a shift supervisor. So they're like,
California has those too.
what was it?
I said I think California has those too, but it's only like a couple states.
Yeah, there's only 2 states. I don't know what the other one is, but so people always get confused, and I'm like shift manager. So they have a lot more responsibility than a shift supervisor. So they like run the floor, they do schedules, they can do everything I do, but they're just all separated. So I have 4 of them. But yeah, it's very different because sometimes they'll be like the play caller, which is, for people who don't work at Starbucks, they're the ones running the shift, and I'll just be doing kind of like what they tell me, which is very different in my world because I was used to being the store manager, being the one in charge. So yeah, it is different, but it's very good to see like somebody else running the team. It's cool to see. I really like how they do it because then you can also critique each other too, like you did that good or whatever the case may be.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, very different.
Something else that stood out to me was also from the second video was how I don't know if this is one of the prompts, so I apologize if this is going off topic, but delegating tasks equals creating trust. And that really stood out to me because that's so true. Because when somebody empowers me to do something that's not usually what I do, it kind of gives me that sense of pride and also lets me know that that person's invested in my development because they're giving me that responsibility. So that's one thing that really stood out to me from that video.
I try to delegate. Being a supervisor in my position, I try to delegate as much as possible. Not only does, like you said, help develop my associate, it also takes off the pressure from myself because as one person, I can't do it all. So why not use your resources and work on your talent planning so you can teach, coach, and train your associates to take your place when you potentially promote.
I think I covered all of the things that I made a bunch of notes after watching and reading. But I think we covered most of or everything that I had made notes of. Did anybody else have anything that they had made notes on that they wanted to share back?
The one thing I don't know if you guys read the How Successful Leaders Think article. I just wanted to get your guys' opinions on what you thought about that. And I mean, really, it was just about the one case of the Red Hat Linux guy and how he decided to, market his product and sell his product. So, I mean, it wasn't like a lot of different examples. I mean, he came up with a good solution. I just don't know that I buy into the concept of he's got a different kind of thinking called integrative thinking. I really just think mostly it was he delayed making a decision on how he was going to market and sell his product until he figured out the right way to do it. I don't know that it really was some kind of amazing integrative thinking.
Like strategy.
Wonder if you just had any thoughts about that.
I read it and I didn't really understand, and the way you put it kind of makes more sense to me because I was reading it and I'm like, okay. But yeah, they framed it as if it was like very innovative, and I just didn't see that. So I went back and I skimmed it again, and I'm like, okay, and I kind of moved on to the next article. Because it was I think that was the lengthy article, right? It was pretty substantial. Yeah. So I thought I missed something.
Yeah, well, maybe it's easier if you're in the software industry, because you just kind of live through it, So the bottom line is that he was trying to sell a product that other people were giving away for free. And so his problem was, how do I make money on it if somebody else is giving it away for free? So to do it kind of more as a service, right? So you can sell the service, which, people that were buying it felt more comfortable because they'd have somebody to support it rather than just getting a free CD-ROM every once in a while. And you know, nobody.
It's kind of like what iTunes is dealing with right now against Spotify and iHeartRadio. It's kind of like the same thing.
Yeah. It's odd in these industries where some stuff is just absolutely free, right? The open source software.
Like how do you make it a name? Yeah. Very cool. Anything else from anybody? And I apologize. I didn't. Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. You apologize. Go ahead.
I didn't set a timer or anything to see how long it was going.
I just wanted to mention one more thing that I thought was pretty interesting. It was chapter 10. I don't know if we all have the same book, but it was about the networking, social capital, and integrating across teams. And for me, the whole expanding your social network and boundary spanning and the whole 6 degrees of separation. I guess it was a Harvard study, but I always thought that was just something that people did with Kevin Bacon. But the fact that they have all the separation with, you know, all of your contacts that you make and all the connections that you make, I thought that was pretty interesting, because my social network is kind of small, and it was an area that kind of opened my eyes, because I'm like, well, this person who's connected to this group and then this group and then this group is more valuable than a person who just has a small group of people. And I guess it's another thing with this day and age where, I mean, there were always networks, but now with LinkedIn and all the other sources we have, there's so fewer degrees of separation between everybody. And I just thought that was really interesting. And then the structural holes in the organization, I thought that was, for me, it was a really cool topic.
It is. And I think, again, like with technology, it's kind of removing those extra layers. Even with Starbucks, we have a company Facebook called Workplace.
Yeah,
and just today, my boss is telling me I need to be on it more. Like, are you really telling me to Facebook at work more? And I just, you know, realizing how much time has changed our expectation at work and how we communicate. But also, I'm finding it hard to compartmentalize those things because it's communication coming at you in all sorts of different ways, right? Text, email, Facebook, Workplace, Instagram. It's like, what's the official communication where I'm going to be held accountable for something? So that's kind of where I'm at with just networking and social media and just all the media that we have right now. Because on top of that, we also have like OneDrive and apps and, you know, shared documents. And so I think maneuvering through those is something I'm definitely digging into more, and kind of, again, like re-establishing some sort of team charter. So we understand like what things are for what. Because in my world, we deal with a lot of people who are external outside of our company, because we have licensees, you know, Targets, Hiltons. So understanding those different ways we communicate and with who is really important. It's getting even more complex with the more technology that we have.
I think this was a successful first run.
Yeah, everybody's video worked, everybody's audio worked. It was so good to meet you guys. I know we did our intros before we hit record. It was really great to get to know you guys. And and one thing I did want to mention, even while we are on recording, is that I did talk to Dr. Shanley, and she said she just wanted me to reiterate that anything that we say on Google Hangouts, you know how we're just communicating informally on there, none of that is being graded for participation or anything like that, because she can't see it. So since we're doing video discussions, I think that'll be okay. If you guys have any other thoughts on that, let me know. But really, I was only using it just, you know, like, hey, I'm going to get on Zoom right now, or this very informal communication. Okay.
Okay.
All right. I'm going to stop the video and